Yeah, we back. Now, I'm going to cover a topic that constantly comes up in my comment section. A topic that has a lot of conflicting stories coming from different sources. So I'm just going to come with my opinion and interpretation of the topic. Now, what inspired this video was last night I was on YouTube and I was watching a live stream from Pan-Africanism Strikes Back, a video entitled "Is Brandon a Fake Pan-Africanist?" And in that video, he was discussing capitalism versus socialism. And, topics such as different times in history when socialist regimes were overthrown by, nefarious capitalist forces behind the curtain. And during that broadcast, it got me to thinking, damn near most coup d'etats that I could think of off the top of my head, most times that I can think of, it was usually some rich capitalists, some rich men in the background, a group of rich men got their money together and got somebody up out of here. And it got me thinking of my own country because, as you know, the Haitian president was assassinated a couple years ago, and it was that exact same situation. A group of rich men got their money together, hired some shooters, hired some hitmen, got them up out of here. And it got me to thinking about the assassination of Dessalines. Like I said, it always comes up in my comment section, and that was the same situation. A group of rich men came together and felt that it was in their best interest to get somebody up out of here. Now, I'm gonna let's get into it, man. Let's get into the topic. And keep in mind, this is my interpretation, right? I'm not gonna say what I'm speaking is the gospel truth. It's my interpretation from my years of studying the topic and things like that. Like I said, different sources are gonna tell you different things, but in this video, we're gonna get into my interpretation. Now, let's get into it. Before we get into it, let's set the stage and go into the background of everybody involved in the assassination, right? To the left, we got General Henry Christophe. In the middle, we got General Jean-Jacques Dessalines. To the right, we got General Alexander Pétion. Three men from different classes of society. General Christophe coming from the class of the free blacks. He gained his freedom from the plantation system by military service in the French military. Starting around the age of 12, 13 years old, he had served in the American Revolution and was actually present during the siege of Savannah as a young teenager. And some sources claim that was the first time that he was shot. During the years of the American Revolutionary War, Christophe spent his teenage years in the southern United States, around Georgia, around Florida, and then upon return to the colony in his late teens, early 20s, he got a job working for another free black man who owned a hotel. That hotel was one of the most popular hotels in all of the Caribbean. Keep in mind, it was located in the capital city of the richest colony in the world during that time. And Christophe was working as a dishwasher, a waiter, things like that, and ended up getting into a relationship with the daughter of his boss. The young couple ended up later getting married, sometime I believe in the 1790s, right in the middle of the revolution. So Christophe, as a young man, already got his freedom, got a job, and got married to the daughter of one of the richest free black men in all of the Caribbean during the colonial period. And also, apart from working at the hotel, Christophe also earned money independently by buying and selling horses along the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So by the time the revolution popped off around 1791, Christophe was 24 years old. He was already a married man, married into a powerful family, and he already had money. He came into the revolution already having a bag of money. Now, let's get into the background of Dessalines. Dessalines came from the bottom class of the society. He came from the bottom. Like, how the rappers be talking about, I came from the bottom. Dessalines, he came from the bottom, man. He came from them sugar cane plantations, boy. He was on them plantations until his early 30s, man. Since he was a toddler until he was a grown man in his early 30s. He grew up directly in the middle of the plantation system, seeing all the atrocities and the crimes against humanity that happened during slavery. When the revolution popped off, he was 33 years old. He was around the age of 33, and he obtained his freedom by escaping into the wilderness and joining the rebel slaves in the mountains. Now, I believe Dessalines died around the age of 48, so from 33 to 48, he only spent about 15 years, you could say, as a free man, but the majority of those years as a free man was fighting against different colonial powers and trying to run a nation. He really didn't have any free time, so Dessalines really had a life where he never really had a time to kick back and relax, man, unfortunately. Now, I make it a point to talk about the different social classes that the men came from, the different generals came from, because the society during the colonial period was a very divided society, not only by races. I mean, keep in mind, the level of division among races during the colonial period was crazy, man. The French created so many different categories of races. You had the Negro, you had the mulatto, you had the Grief, you had the Octoroon, you had the Hexadecaroon, you had the Octoroon. It was so many different categories, and everybody was on a different rank based on all type of different things: skin tone, background, family background, social class. Like, it was just a lot of division among the population, and that division also created tension among the generals. The third character we got to get into is General Alexander Pétion. Many people place him in the social class of the free mulattoes, but really he was a quadroon. His mother was a mixed race woman, and his father was a wealthy white Frenchman. Born in the year 1770, so that means he was around the age of 21 when the revolution popped off. Around 1788, around the age of 18, his father sent him to France to go into the French military academy. Alexander Pétion is known as one of the greatest Haitian artillerymen of all time. Even though I'm not the greatest fan of General Alexander Pétion, I can say that he was indeed one of the greatest Haitian military men of all time because he was the youngest of the bunch. When the revolution popped off, Toussaint Louverture was 48 years old, Dessalines was 33 years old, Christophe was 24 years old, Pétion was 21 years old. And before Pétion would rise to become the commanding general of Port-au-Prince around the age of 33, he was under the mentorship of General André Rigaud, the most powerful mulatto in the southern regions of Haiti. Now, going back to the different social classes that the three men came from, Dessalines represented the mass population, the vast majority of the slaves, the 400,000 plus enslaved blacks on the sugarcane plantations. Christophe represented the free blacks, those who may or may have not been born into slavery, but somehow ended up acquiring their freedom, and even though they may have little political and social rights, they are still able to operate with some level of autonomy that is not granted to the mass population of enslaved blacks. For example, Christophe had a job earning income and had a side hustle. He was an entrepreneur, he was a businessman in his early 20s. Like I said before, he came into the revolution, already had a bag of money, already had a wife and kids, already had a house, already was doing his thing, already had horses, already was, getting fly, moving around. And Christophe's situation was unique because he was a fully black man in the free black class. The majority of the free blacks were the black and mixed race mistresses of the white Frenchmen and also their mixed race offspring, such as General Alexander Pétion. The majority of black men and women who had 2 black parents, 4 black grandparents, they were held in bondage on the sugarcane plantations. So a lot of Christophe's childhood friends, a lot of the men he grew up with was from the free mulatto class. He grew up with a lot of the mulatto boys, such as General Chavannes, born in 1748, so he would have been around the age of 43 years old when the revolution popped off. He was almost 20 years older than Christophe, but he also came from that same class of the free blacks and the free mulattoes. In fact, let's quickly jump through his life story because I feel like he's also a historical figure that constantly gets overlooked. The son of rich mulatto parents and received a good education. In 1778, the expedition under D'Estaing, who sent the Chasseurs Volontaires de Saint-Domingue to assist the U.S. Continental Army, Chavannes was one of those who had volunteered. He distinguished himself during the operations in Virginia and New York, and especially during the retreat from Savannah in December 1778. Once the independence of the American colonies had been accomplished, Chavannes returned to Haiti. When Vincent Ogé landed near Cap Français on the 23rd of October 1790, intending to create an agitation among the people of African descent in favor of their political rights, Chavannes sided with him. Now, time out. Keep in mind, Vincent Ogé is also from that free black, free mulatto class. Now, let's continue. Chavannes sided with him. Chavannes wanted all the slaves to be declared free, but Ogé did not follow his advice and informed the assembly of his intention to take the opposite course. The mulattoes raised a force of about 1,000 men. The mulattoes being defeated by the colonists, Ogé, Chavannes, and a few others took refuge in the Spanish part of the island, and the Saint Dominican Assembly asked for their extradition, according to the treaty. The jurist, Vincent Farah, made a powerful plea in their favor, and the King of Spain gave him a decoration, but the royal audience of Saint Domingo decided against the refugees, who were delivered to the Saint Dominican authorities on the 21st of December 1790. 2 months later, Chavannes and Ogé were sentenced to be hammered to death, and the sentence was executed in the presence of the Provisional Assembly and authorities of Cap Français. Now, Jean-Baptiste Chavannes, that was one of Christophe's big homies. That was one of his elders. That was somebody that Christophe looked up to. When Christophe was working at the hotel, Chavannes would come through and they would be kicking it. That was his man. By the time the final battle was fought, towards the end of 1803, the Battle of Vertières, the big 3 remaining generals had already become multimillionaires. And how was that possible? By a massive transfer of wealth when the white Frenchman ran off the island and abandoned his mansion, abandoned his estates. Guess who moved in and took ownership? The generals and the officers. Also, if you were a commander or a general that controlled a major port city, then you generated a lot of money because that is where trade was conducted. And if you take a look up on the screen, you'll see a map of Haiti. Now, Christophe was the commanding general of the North, all of the North. Keep in mind, Christophe came into the revolution with a bag of money, and he accumulated way more money during his time as the commanding general of the northern port city of Cap Français. This was the capital city of the richest colony in the world, so you already know Christophe made a bag. Dessalines was the commanding general of the Port-au-Prince region, which is kind of towards the middle of the map, and General Alexander Pétion was down south with the mulatto boys, and they had those port cities in the south on lock. And not only that, they were the sons of wealthy white Frenchmen, so they already had property coming down through inheritance. In addition to the property that was acquired, that was abandoned by the white Frenchmen that hopped on them boats and got the hell out the island during the revolution. And during the years when Toussaint Louverture was the commanding governor of the island, he kind of had a laissez-faire kind of mentality as it pertained to the commanding generals. For example, Christophe was the commanding general of the North, which meant that even though he had to report to Toussaint as his superior, he was still autonomous in his reign as the governor of the North. He can do whatever the fuck he wanted in his territory as the commanding general of the North. And the same goes for Dessalines and Port-au-Prince, and the same went for the mulatto boys down south. Everybody was basically autonomous, but there was a chain of command, and Toussaint Louverture, he sat at the top. And the only thing that Toussaint demanded of his officers was to simply pay your taxes, right? Apart from that, you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. Each commanding general had an army under him that reported to him, and that commanding general had to report to Toussaint Louverture. That was the chain of command. And as long as the coffee and sugar production was maintained, Toussaint Louverture was not going to be on top of your back, worried about what you're doing in your own territory. As long as you can mobilize the troops whenever necessary, that's all that mattered. Now, when the country gained its independence under Dessalines, things began to change. Dessalines began to adopt somewhat of a socialist model where everything came under the ownership of the state. The state was going to redistribute all the wealth and property that was accumulated during the years of the revolution. And also keep in mind, Dessalines came from that enslaved population class, enslaved black class, right from the bottom. So he wanted his class of people to be able to enjoy in the fruits of their labor. But this political initiative was the source of much of the tension between Dessalines and many of the high-ranking generals from the Southern mulatto class. Keep in mind, many of the generals from the Southern mulatto class, they spent a lot of their formative years in France. Many of them identified with France. Many of them viewed themselves as Frenchmen. So a lot of them did not really enjoy the prospect of having to be ruled over by a black man, especially not a black man from the sugarcane plantations, the lowest class of society. You got to keep in mind, these are the sons of big men from Paris, and many of them were indoctrinated with the prejudices of the time period. And they did not take too kindly of the fact that this former slave was now ruling over them, but now going to put in policy that would confiscate their property that many of them felt was family property that was going to be passed down through inheritance. In their mind, they were thinking, what right does this Negro have to take my father's shit, my uncle's shit, my grandfather's shit? This is family property. And even going back to Christophe, yeah, Christophe was pro-black, but keep in mind, Christophe was a rich nigga. By the time the nation secured independence, Christophe was a multi-millionaire. Keep in mind, I told you, he came into the revolution in his early 20s with a bag of money, already married into an elite family. And going back to what I said about the colony being a divided society, I've read in many sources that even though Dessalines was Christophe's man, yeah, he was a fellow black man, but Christophe was a bougie black man. You know what I mean? Christophe was a bougie black man. Like when Dessalines came with those policies, talking about everything is going to be under state control, and all those policies that were established under the reign of Toussaint Louverture, where everybody was autonomous in their own little area, and everybody can freely do as they please as long as they pay their taxes to the state. That was not going to be the case. Dessalines' regime was way more hands-on, and the policies were way more restrictive. And Dessalines' administration had way more oversight than Toussaint Louverture's administration, where Toussaint Louverture, he had followed a laissez-faire, capitalist, militaristic, agricultural model. Dessalines had more of a socialist model that everything was under the administration of the state, from the finances to the land to everything in between. And as you know, that typical battle between socialism and capitalism, you already know how it goes. Christophe was not trying to hear that shit. Pétion was not trying to hear that shit. Like I said, General Alexander Pétion, the son of a wealthy white Frenchman, a wealthy property-owning Frenchman. Christophe, young rich nigga, been getting money since his early 20s. So in typical fashion, when you're a head of state and the policies that you put in place, they threaten the financial interests of certain powerful men, you already know what happens next. Coup d'etat. General Alexander Pétion did not want to be ruled over by a black man, especially a black man that was going to threaten his economic interests. General Henry Christophe, even though he was a fellow black man, in his mind, I'm assuming he was like, bro, I'm the commanding general of the capital city of the richest colony on the planet. You got to understand, Cap Français, now known as Cap Haïtien, was the wealthiest hotspot in all of the European colonies during that time. It was equivalent to New York of its era. And because of that fact, Christophe quickly became among the wealthiest generals of the entire bunch. And when he passed away, he had a fortune of over $10 billion. Long story short, Alexander Pétion had approached Christophe with a plan to get Dessalines moved out the way. The assassination was orchestrated by General Alexander Pétion and his officers, and it occurred in the month of October 1806. There are two different stories of how it took place. One story is Dessalines was riding through Port-au-Prince and he was ambushed and he was assassinated. He was shot dead. The second story is Pétion invited Dessalines to his house where he poisoned him. Now, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you which story is true, which story is false. In my opinion, I'm leaning more towards the ambush, assassination, shot dead in the street. That's what I think. That's how I think it went down. And the reason I say that is because Christophe's secretary later published a book around the year, 1814, 1816, where he spoke about the assassination of Dessalines. In fact, go to my playlist section. I have a playlist entitled Memoirs from the Haitian Revolution, written by Baron de Vasti, one of Christophe's secretaries. And also go to another playlist I have entitled The Most Powerful Black Man of the Last 500 Years, where I talk about life during the reign of King Henry Christophe. Even though the assassination was orchestrated by General Alexander Pétion, Many people, many sources also implicate Christophe in the crime because he had prior knowledge. He had inside information in regards to the plot. So he could have easily told Dessalines, hey, bro, don't go to Port-au-Prince. Don't go to Port-au-Prince, bro. They on you. They on you. They on your head, bro. He could have easily gave him a call. He could have easily rode over and told him what it was. But because Christophe never told Dessalines what it was and he let him ride into that trap, he is also implicated in the crime. Even though he was at his house in the north, not even in Port-au-Prince when the assassination took place. But another reason why some sources also implicate Christophe in the crime, because as soon as Christophe got the news that Dessalines was assassinated, Christophe published a manifesto to all the nations of the world, basically telling them, we open for business. We open for business, baby. Coffee, sugar, everything you need, we got it. This manifesto was published before a provisional government was even set up. Christophe was already at work trying to get the money back popping again. And Pétion and all his other mulatto generals down south, they went right back, reclaiming their estates and reclaiming their property that their father left behind. Also, a lot of the mulatto generals down south were heavy in the contraband game, moving contraband to Jamaica. And Dessalines' administration was heavy when it came to cracking down on the contraband. Heavy, heavy, heavy. And that's another reason why the mulatto boys down south, they was not fucking with Dessalines. As we know, after Dessalines was assassinated, the country was divided into two segments, two opposing factions. Christophe's government in the north, Pétion's government in the south. Pétion's government in the south, crime-ridden, impoverished, fucked up, corrupt. Christophe's government in the north, prosperous, booming, everything for sale, ports busy, palaces being built, citadels being built, universities being built, schools being built, theaters being built. I already told you, Christophe been getting money since his early 20s, a businessman since his early 20s. So you already know, man, as soon as he was back to business, he got it popping, bro. He got it popping. I'm not saying that he was all the way innocent due to his slight involvement in the assassination of Dessalines, but I'm saying when Christophe got into power, he did amazing things, bro. He did amazing things. And when I was on the live stream last night listening to Brandon talking about the socialism versus capitalism, it got me thinking. It got me thinking of the situation because this was a case of a bunch of rich niggas, a bunch of rich capitalist money getting niggas who felt as if their economic interests were threatened by someone in power, so they mobilized their monies together and got that person out of power. And that is pretty much how it goes for the majority of coup d'etats around the world, man. That's really how it goes. The reason why the majority of coup d'etats happen around the world is because there's a group of rich men somewhere that are not happy with what's going on in a certain country or in a certain government, and they mobilize their monies together and they either send that person into exile or they send that person into the afterlife. Same thing happened with Dessalines. Same thing happened with Kwame Nkrumah. Same thing happened with Patrice Lumumba. Same thing happened with Thomas Sankara. Man, that is how it goes, bro. That is how it goes. And the same thing happened with the Haitian president a couple years ago, man. I'm telling you, the majority of coup d'etats happen because there are a group of rich men somewhere that is not happy with an administration. I'm telling you, that is how it goes, bro. That is how it goes. And I figure I make this video because I'm constantly getting comments and things like that in regards to the situation. So, you know, for anyone who wanted some inside information, some more information from my opinion, my interpretation, then yeah, the assassination of General Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Emperor Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Jacques the First. Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Dessalines back in the building. Yes, indeed. Like, share, subscribe, Cash App in the description, and I'm gone. Peace.
Reincarnated, I'm back in original fashion. I left on a horse and came back in that ass, and I left with abundance and came back to famine. We used to be pyramids, now we be rapping. Look how the mighty have fallen. Used to be running, now we be walking. When you be cooning, that's when they applauded. Selling your soul, your sons and your daughter. Gotta come up in this shit, they stuck in the mix. Really, my heart it be breaking. That's why I'm stacking that paper and handle my business. Pass it down in generation. Talking about money and power and building a nation. That's a deadly combination. Never be watching the TV, they pushing agendas, falsifying information. Know they got malice intentions. Step in the room and I'm feeling the tension. Enemy watching me blocking my vision. Pay for the check cause I need my redemption. Building my kingdom, I need it protected. Ready for war like a young money Congo. Never decided the team is the motto. Up in the crib and I'm whipping up waffles. Up in the crib and I'm smoking gelato. I'm chilling, I'm taking my pain and make it ambition. I'm blessed by the gods, but I ain't religious. I came for the power, they came for the bitch. They making no hourly wage, I got business. This shit is an art and they could never be taught. Selling my soul, I can never be bought. Play with my money, I see you ain't caught. Run to the check and I do it for sport. Babylon falling, I go to the source. Packing my luggage and go overseas. Shorty be with me and she so elite. Shorty be chocolate, I'm calling her Hershey. Secret intelligence probably gon' murk me. Don't fuck with brands, cause nigga I'm Haitian. Say the wrong shit and you're smacking their faces.